A note to listeners, American Hustlers was created from in-depth research and reporting, public records, and the opinions of participants. The views expressed do not reflect those of Frequency Machine, its affiliates, licensees, or employees. In some cases, names were changed to protect the privacy of those involved, and all subjects are presumed innocent until proven guilty. This episode also includes some violent and sexually explicit content that may be triggering to some. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Previously on American Hustlers.
Cliff loved people, all types of people. He had such a wonderful life.
All the digging my partner Julie and I did into the life and crimes of Kosal Narula, Danny Garcia, and the gay grifters inevitably led us to the murder of 74-year-old Cliff Lambert. But we still didn't know much about who Cliff was or why he, out of all of Danny and Kosal's victims, had lost more than money. Not until I found Carl.
Hello?
Hi, is this?
Yes.
Oh my God, I cannot believe it. I'm calling about Cliff Lambert.
Did you know Cliff?
Carl helped us fill in a lot of blanks. After a recent divorce from his partner, Cliff Lambert began doing what many single peeps do these days, swiping left or right on dating apps. So it wasn't long before Cliff recounted to his friend Carl.
I met these guys through the internet. He said, you know what, he's been coming here visiting me.
The guy from the dating app was good old Danny Garcia. Nothing romantic sparked, but Danny would come stay at Cliff's house and was siphoning money whenever he did. A few months later, when Kaushal got wind of this new potential mark...
How did Kaushal even find out about Cliff and set his sights on him?
I'm sure knowing Danny was talking about this wealthy guy, drives a Rolls Royce, drives a Mercedes, cha-ching. I think they just saw dollar signs. And once they saw those dollar signs, it didn't take them long to put a plan into action. It was early December of 2008. Cliff had made plans to meet with friends, but was a no-show. Cliff's friends couldn't shake the feeling that something bad had happened. And they were right. From what I can gather, December 4th is the first time that Kaushal and Cliff had dinner together, and then 2 days later, Cliff goes missing.
Wow.
Yeah, and missing to this day. In early 2007, Mark Evans, a contractor and realtor in Saratoga, California, got a knock on his door. When he opened it, he found a young man standing there.
He was a very clean-cut guy. He was neat, pristine. He came across as someone that was well-educated.
The young man? You guessed it, Kosal Narula. Kaushal was there, he said, because he had information regarding a contract dispute that Mark was involved in with a former client named Stephen Valentino. You may recall that Julie did a long interview with him.
You may recall? Really? People are going to just forget Stephen Valentino.
This is the moment. This is the day. Want more?
All right, point taken. In any event, Kaushal had been Stephen's roommate and friend, or so Stephen thought. But now, here he was, offering to rat him out to Mark.
Kaushal said Stephen Valentino has ripped me off. So I will help you in your lawsuit, but I just want $250,000 for my help.
All of this will make sense in a minute, I promise. Just hang tight.
Now, I looked at him and said, if you want to help, that's great, but I can't pay you for your help. First, I don't need your help that bad. And second, it would compromise my lawsuit against Mr. Valentino. So I'm not going to pay you. He said, well, I don't even have a place to live right now. I said, well, I didn't know much about him, but I said, if you check out okay, I'm sure that I have some guest quarters I could put you up in my house in Saratoga. So let's start with what you know. And at that point, he told me that he knew Mr. Valentino and how his mother had agreed for my business to do $350,000 worth of work on their house.
Mark prepared a contract for the work. A remodel, including a master bedroom suite downstairs for Stephen's octogenarian mother. She allegedly approved the plan and signed the paperwork, but then things went sideways.
And then how later he had decided that he would try to get out of paying for that, claiming his mother was senile.
While Mark did think that Stephen was trying to skip out on the bill, he in no way bought Kaushal's story.
I'm 69 years old. I've been in business since I was 20. And it's not impossible to deceive me, but I knew his story wasn't real. I felt sorry for him. I thought he needed some direction. So I didn't really know. But I decided to help him out.
Mark's intuition was right. Kaushal had no real valuable info that would help him with his lawsuit. And obviously, Mark didn't fork over the $250,000 Kaushal was asking for. But Mark did let him stay in his guest house.
He impressed people. He spoke calmly. He spoke kindly. He endeared himself to people easily. He had potential. He had a lot of potential. And I was thinking, hopefully, I'm being a positive influence on this kid.
Kaushal stayed with Mark for around 4 months. And then, without much explanation, he moved on. Just like he'd moved on from crashing with Stephen. And just like he'd moved on from crashing with his college friends, Pam and Thomas. And that might have been the end of Mark's role in our tale. Except...
Didn't hear from Kaushal for a while. And then, let's see. They showed up at my house, came with his attorney, Replogle.
This was around mid-December of 2008.
So he says, Mark, I want you to sell this property, and I want to sell it right away. I want to get my money out of it. And I said, what's the story on the property? He goes, well, this guy molested me, and so he's given me the property, so I just want to get my cash. Well, this sounded convoluted already.
Kaushal told Mark that the homeowner, Cliff Lambert, molested him, and in doing so, also gave him HIV. So in order to make things right between them, Cliff gave Kaushal the title to his house. Of course, we know by now, most everything that comes out of Kaushal's mouth is a lie. But this lie is a doozy. Mark was leery from the jump.
So I said, I'll tell you what, just pass by with the documents you have, and I'll tell you whether or not we could do a deal with the property.
Kaushal did as he was told. He brought Mark notarized power of attorney documents and the title to Cliff Lambert's Palm Springs home. After looking everything over, Mark knew something was off. Conveniently, his then wife worked at a real estate title company, so he gave her a call.
We had a copy of the power of attorney, and I said, how do we know that this power of attorney was real? You know? And she says, let me go to work and I'll look some stuff up.
Mark didn't have to wait long for his answer.
She called me from work. She said, hey, this guy is a missing person. This is not good.
I'm Kim Kantner, and we're about to find out just how not good it was. This is American Hustlers, presented by True Crime News. Now, before we get any further with Mark's story, we need to go back in time a month or so to understand why that power of attorney was so important and how Kaushal, Danny, and David Replogle were able to get Cliff to sign one over. I knew that Tyson had looked into this extensively while working on his book with the sisters, so I gave him a ring.
The plan was to kidnap Cliff and then force him basically to sign a power of attorney and then, drop him off somewhere far away.
Far away equals Mexico. Danny and David Replogle had a bunch of contacts in Puerto Vallarta stemming from the Thomas White con, aka that time they tried to bribe a handful of young Mexican boys to accuse Thomas White of rape. So Mexico was a familiar place where they felt confident they could stash Cliff Lambert with few questions asked. The only hitch was that Kaushal was already on the radar of the police and ICE for a handful of his previous cons. Presumably, forcing Cliff to sign the house directly over to him would be way too risky. So, who else in the gay grifters network would be a safe bet?
So Kosal Narula called Russell Manning with a business proposal.
Russell Manning, remember, was Kaushal's ex, who worked at the art gallery and ended up in on the Gary Heidenreich art con that Julie told you about in episode 5. That hadn't gone too well for Russell. He'd been charged and spent 4 months in jail for his trouble.
Kaushal said he and David Replogle would like to fly him from San Francisco down to Palm Springs. The goal was to get Russell Manning to be the power of attorney for Cliff Lambert. Russell can sell Cliff Lambert's house. As a power of attorney, he can empty Cliff Lambert's bank accounts. As a power of attorney, he can transfer the title of the vehicle. I mean, these are things that are usually done when somebody is sick or incapacitated.
All Russell had to do was agree to let David Replogle use his name on the power of attorney documents, make a few trips to various banks to retrieve money from Cliff's accounts, and in return, he'd get a nice chunk of change.
Russell was a little taken back because, he had just gone through this whole disaster with Gary Heidenreich and the art con.
Right.
And so your first inkling would be, I shouldn't even answer the phone, when this asshole calls me. But he did.
Why did he? Theoretically, a stable and secure person would run for the hills with this type of proposal. But one common thread that Julie and I have seen in the people these guys conned, or used in some facet of a con, is neediness. And if there's one thing Russell was, it was needy. Even though he was out free at this point, he was flat broke, a felon, and was persona non grata in the art business. What Russell knew about the kidnapping plot, we'd need him to tell us, and you already know from Julie, he ain't talking.
Russell needed a night to think about it, but he ultimately agreed to do it.
Once Russell was on board, Kaushal and company turned their attention to actually nabbing Cliff. Kaushal was the distraction, and the story he concocted to distract was this. Posing as a lawyer named Samuel Oren, he would fly to Palm Springs and meet with Cliff to discuss money that had been left to him by a recently deceased heiress. The deceased heiress, by the way, was real. The money, of course, was not. Danny was the inside man. He had the 411 on Cliff. He knew the ins and outs of his home, his routine, and where all his important paperwork was. His job would be to help Kaushal navigate any unexpected hurdles. On December 4th, when the night finally arrived, the group wasn't exactly being overly careful. Just listen to a couple members of our team read some of the text Danny and Kaushal traded while Samuel Oren was whining and dining Cliff Lambert. Danny.
Is he still happy? Does he believe you?
Kaushal texts back.
Honey, everyone believes me until they have been conned.
A little later, Danny texts.
Focus and tell me when your papers are signed.
Kaushal.
I'm focused, just jittery.
Danny.
Good. Calm down. Stay focused.
Meanwhile, while Cliff and Samuel Oren were at dinner, two men had entered Cliff Lambert's home.
Craig McCarthy and Miguel Bustamante were two gentlemen from San Francisco who David and Kaushal had convinced to help in this kidnapping plot. And they had entered Cliff Lambert's garage through an open window. One of them grabbed a screwdriver and climbed up in the rafters. The other hid behind a garbage can, and they waited.
Kaushal/Oren and Cliff's dinner ended uneventfully, and they parted ways.
Cliff Lambert drove home and parked his car in the garage and gets out of his car, but neither Craig McCarthy or Miguel Bustamante moved. I think they both sort of froze, and Cliff went into his house.
So they failed to kidnap Cliff that night.
Yeah.
When Danny heard the news of the failed abduction, he said this to Kaushal via text.
I'm going to bed. This thing is a bust. You can tell David the bad news.
Kaushal texted back.
No, we can't. We can't, Danny.
Danny replied.
I know not to have faith in people I never met.
At that point, Danny, annoyed and disgruntled, called his cousin Dennis in Vegas to come pick him up. Dennis, who I'm sure you remember from earlier episodes, said he'd be there in the morning. Danny was tapping out, but Kaushal was determined as ever and sent a text saying as much.
Let's make tomorrow happen so that we can go on, take over the world, enslave humanity for the better good and our profit.
There are many things Kaushal could and has been accused of. Lacking ambition is not one of them.
So let's back up for 1 second. Who's Miguel Bustamante? Who's Craig McCarthy? And how on earth did they get involved in this and to Palm Springs?
So Craig McCarthy, 28-year-old from Chicago, but after serving a full term in the United States Marine Corps, had moved to San Francisco. And so he was working on his internship as a medical assistant And Miguel was 26 years old at the time, and he was attending Heald College. So they both met at that college when they had a math class together. Miguel was a bartender at night at a gay bar in the Castro called Jet. It had a very LA, New York vibe, and it was definitely a hip place to go.
Gotcha.
And basically, David and Kaushal are sitting at the bar, and I'm not privy to the actual conversation, but at some point, they mentioned how this old man in Palm Springs had given Kaushal HIV, and they wanted some help kidnapping somebody. And for whatever reason, Miguel bit, and he was like, yeah, I'll help you with that.
I'm sure they dangled money in front of Miguel.
Yep. In fact, that amount was $30,000.
Oh, wow.
So Miguel, he's like, I could probably use some help with this. And so Craig, coming out of the Marine Corps, strong guy, young.
Craig McCarthy agrees to help his buddy out. But what exactly Miguel told Craig he'd be helping with is wiggly at best. In a perfect world, we'd just flat out ask him. And Julie and I tried to make that happen. I sent Craig 3 prison letters over a 4-month period. My goal being to get him on the phone to record him. But it seemed Craig didn't really care much about my goals because in those 4 months, I hadn't heard a thing from him. Then,
So tell me,
Well, as I do every morning, I wake up and I decide, where am I going to walk the dog today? And I was like, I haven't been to the mailbox in a couple of weeks. And this was probably my last visit to the mailbox because I've sent my 3 letters to Craig McCarthy. And I figured if he didn't answer by 3, he's never going to. So yeah, traipsed down there, no expectations. And I was like, oh my God, I have mail.
well, here's my question. What did you say to him?
I didn't go into a ton of, I just said we were doing a podcast and that, I would love to hear his side of the story.
Okay. Well, let's open it.
Here we go. Oh.
What?
Okay. Oh my God. Weird. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Well, tell me.
in order to visit someone in prison, at least in California, I don't know how it works elsewhere, they have to send you a form. It's called the CDCR 106 that I'm now holding in my hand for me to fill out. And it has to be initiated by the inmate because obviously they don't want weirdos putting in an application. So it has to originate from the inmate. You can't just download this. You can't get it. You can't photocopy it. It has to come from them. So that to me says I have a road trip in my future. To
Whoa.
Jamestown.
Was there a note with it or?
Nothing. Yeah.
So that's his way of saying, come see me?
That's certainly how I was interpreting it. Except there was a problem. There's always a problem.
Yeah, here we go. The prisoner must sign the questionnaire before sending it to the prospective visitor. Guess what? He did not sign it.
Oh, Lord.
So I'm not going to be taking a road trip anytime soon.
Look, it is a step forward.
What else does it say on here? Yeah, I have to list all my criminal convictions and arrests. That will not take much time.
Much time? It wouldn't take me any time.
Mail it to the lieutenant. Oh, attire restrictions. Do not wear clothing that resembles the clothing that prisoners wear. So no orange jumpsuits, no clothing that exposes the breast, genitalia, or buttocks area.
Obviously, they had to write that because somebody came
in cutout
ticking
clothing.
all those boxes.
Yeah.
I think we can handle that.
I think we can.
Yeah.
I can't believe, how does he not know he doesn't have to sign this? He's had to have had a visitor in 12 years, right?
Maybe not.
Oh my God, that makes me, even though he helped murder someone, that makes me kind of sad.
I received the form from Craig in late February of 2020, and we all know what happened in March 2020.
Tonight, the tough new coronavirus lockdowns. 33 million in California now under the nation's strictest stay-at-home order. New York on the verge of its own new crackdown.
Time was a blur, and weeks passed. And although I had just sent the form back to Craig asking him to sign it, this happened.
I got more mail from Craig McCarthy.
Have you opened it?
Yeah, I opened it. So obviously he sent me the form, but that was like 3 or 4 weeks ago now. and coronavirus hit. Turns out I didn't have envelopes or stamps because I always use all that stuff from the office. I was like, how do I not have a single envelope in my house that isn't like a windowed envelope? And P.S., why do I even have a windowed envelope? So anyway, it took me a while to get back to him. Our letters had crossed somewhere between LA and Craig's prison in Central California. This time, however, he wrote something. So here's what he said. When last you wrote requesting to speak to me, I responded by sending you a form to be filled out and returned to the CDCR. If you are serious about talking with me, you will have to fill this out and send it back to be verified by the institution for visitation. I do not get chances very often to use the phone, which is just as well because I don't feel comfortable conversing over the institution lines. So in all of my letters, all the 3 that I've sent previously, I said, if there's a way for us to talk on the phone or you can call me collect, please do so. But he hasn't, and now at least he's explaining why he hasn't. So he doesn't trust the system.
Well, at least he's definitely interested.
About a week later, Craig sent me back the signed prison form I needed in order to request a visit. I then filled out the form, which basically amounted to a routine background check by the California Department of Corrections. Then, 1 month, almost to the day later, I got another letter from Craig. Hello?
Hi, I'm recording. You wanted to record? Yeah, we're always recording now.
We're always recording. It's a rule. It's a rule we shan't break.
Yeah, 10 years from now when I call you, I'm just going to record it.
Oh my God, that's funny. Well, I got mail, obviously from Craig McCarthy. It's the notice of visitor approval.
Oh, wow.
I have been approved. And then, there's a note on the back that says, the first weekend that you are able to visit after being complete with the visitor registration process will be okay. Let me know ASAP when you wish to come by so I can keep an extra set of ears open. And I'm ready. Craig.
Wow.
He's ready.
Wow.
He's ready and I'm ready. But unfortunately, the universe is not ready. There's no way that they're letting visitors in prisons right now, right?
Right.
They were not. Again, this was July of 2020 and COVID was in full swing. First of all, can I just say I can't believe this is where we're at? With the form and the back and forth, and I had to confess to the correctional department that I had an MIP when I was 16 years old, but here we are. Here we are.
What is an MIP?
Minor in possession of alcohol. It was alcohol. I was going to a school dance with Ron. His name was Ron. And of course we were drinking because it's a school dance. You can't go to a school dance sober. And he got pulled over and he ended up going away in handcuffs. And I don't actually remember how I got home. Did the police take me home? I'm not sure. But anyway, I had to confess that. And then I got approved and now there's a pandemic and I don't know when I can go visit this guy. Since I still don't know when I can go visit this guy, I'll let Tyson pick up the story from here. So basically, Kaushal ropes in Miguel. Miguel ropes in Craig. And the next thing you know, they're on a plane together to Palm Springs.
As crazy as it sounds, welcome to this story.
After the break, it gets even crazier. In early December of 2008, Kaushal, Danny, and David Replogle had set their sights on the fortunes of Cliff Lambert. To do that, they'd enlisted the help of Kaushal's ex, Russell Manning, and 2 near strangers, a San Francisco bartender named Miguel Bustamante and Miguel's roommate, Craig McCarthy. We understood how they'd roped in Manning. He was desperate. Miguel and Craig were harder to pin down. And, as is usually the case, the more answers Julie and I got, the more questions we found ourselves asking.
I'm always curious about why each person is convinced or seduced into helping these guys. Like there's the people who are lied to completely, Gary Heidenreichs, what have you.
Yeah.
But the people that are convinced to go along with crimes, if they've got no skin in the crime game already, it's strange to me. But maybe there was a romantic attachment then between Miguel and Kaushal.
Yeah, and if we're just going to continue to speculate, I guess in Miguel's court, it could have been a combo platter of maybe there was some romantic involvement. Maybe he needed the money. The tuition was due.
Yeah.
And maybe a part of him felt that, after hearing Cliff had given Kaushal AIDS, which we know is not true, that Cliff ought to pay in one way or another. It's hard to say.
So how did Craig McCarthy get roped into this, and why did he say yes? Do we know?
As far as I can tell, he was told all expense paid trip to Palm Springs. We're going to go clubbing at night. We're going to move some furniture during the day. No mention of Cliff.
Craig didn't realize he was saying yes to some kind of criminal activity.
Exactly. It wasn't until he was down there that then he got wind of them wanting to kidnap Cliff.
But then he stayed.
Correct. He stayed. You're absolutely right. That is a fact. He also flew down there. He did not have his own transportation to leave. And also from what I read and heard is he didn't really believe them. Like, he heard them talking and he was like, Miguel doesn't kidnap people. Like, I know him. That's not what he does. They're all blowing smoke. I don't believe this is really going to happen. Like, whether that was his true belief, whether it was denial, whether it was I'm trapped down here and I don't have a way out anyway, I don't know. But part of what, the bill of goods he was sold happened. Like, when they got down there, they went out, raging at night. He and Miguel went to the clubs. They picked up girls, apparently. Like, they were doing, part of what what he was told they were going to do. Later, Craig would say he had no idea he'd be lying in wait in a stranger's garage. Yet, that's exactly where he and Miguel were. Here's more with Tyson. Okay, Cliff is returned from his dinner with Samuel Oren / Kaushal. He's pulled into the garage. Miguel and Craig are in there but don't do shit. Cliff goes in the house, and what do Craig and Miguel do from there?
They crawled back out of the window and went back to the hotel to let Kaushal know that this didn't work.
Kaushal was not at all happy with this news. It's then, in his infinite wisdom, that he had a revelation.
Once we kidnap him, he's going to point the finger at all of us. He knows our faces. This could be bad.
Yep, it took a failed attempt for Kaushal to realize that after Cliff was kidnapped, robbed, and had eventually clawed his way out of Mexico, he might, go to the authorities. And there was only one way to make sure that didn't happen.
The only way to get away with all of this is we're going to have to kill him.
From conman to hitman? Just like that? It seems so. Kaushal wanted Cliff's money, and to get it, Cliff had to die.
At this point, Craig is not interested in any more of this, but the boys put screws to him, and they moved forward with Plan B.
So the next day, December 5th, Plan B goes into motion.
So Samuel Oren, a.k.a. Kaushal, calls Cliff up and says, hey, I'm flying out this evening, but there's one more document that I need you to sign. If it's okay, I'd like to come over this evening and get you to sign it. And, of course, Cliff's like, sure, no problem.
Around 5:30, Samuel Oren / Kosal Narula arrives at Cliff Lambert's swanky Las Palmas neighborhood home.
Cliff lets him in, and Samuel's like, oh, what a nice house, and show me around, and sort of takes a little tour of the house. Now, one thing to note here is Cliff had an alarm system. Anytime you opened a door, there'd be the little beep, beep, beep from the sensor. And because Danny had spent time with Cliff in Cliff's house, Danny knew the alarm code and all of Cliff's personal information. So they had called the alarm company in advance and said that the back door sensor was not working properly and asked if they could disarm it. And so, as Samuel Oren was touring the house, he unlocked that back sliding door that was connected to the kitchen.
At 5:40 p.m., Kaushal texts Miguel.
Stab with knife. Do it now. 98 million is too much to lose.
5 minutes later, Miguel texts.
Inform.
Kaushal texts back.
Jump the wall from the garage and stay on the ground.
Just FYI, if you're planning on killing somebody with me, I will never text you, stab with knife, as you're about to kill someone. What the fuck was he thinking?
To be fair, Kaushal wasn't using a phone that was in his name. Still, they were clearly underestimating how private these texts would stay.
So now, Craig McCarthy and Miguel Bustamante hop the fence into the backyard of Cliff Lambert's house.
A few minutes later, Kaushal's final direction to Miguel and Craig is sent via text.
Okay, try to stab.
Miguel responds.
I am under kitchen window. We are ready.
So they slide the sliding glass door open quietly and go enter the kitchen. They come in with no weapons, so they just grab a couple of knives from the butcher block. And then they make enough of a noise to catch Cliff Lambert's attention. And Cliff goes into the kitchen to see what that noise was. Craig McCarthy comes at him head on, and then Miguel Bustamante comes flying at him with one of the kitchen knives, and with an overhead strike, puts that knife right into the back of Clifford Lambert's neck. And it was so hard when it hit that the knife actually broke, and the blade was stuck in Cliff Lambert's vertebrae.
Oh.
And so Cliff Lambert drops. They grab another knife out of the butcher block and just proceed to go to town, stabbing him over and over and over and over until he just sort of lay there gurgling in his own blood.
And who was doing the stabbing?
Miguel Bustamante was doing the stabbing.
Sound familiar?
He just started stabbing. The blood looks like jello now.
That's Craig, confessing to his involvement in the crime to Palm Spring detectives in a tape Julie played for you when we started this story.
Kaushal comes back in the kitchen and he's like, is it done yet?
Oh, it was done all right. Cliff Lambert had bled out on his kitchen floor. And it didn't take but a beat for Kaushal, Miguel, and Craig to get busy.
Kaushal immediately instructs Craig and Miguel to go through Cliff's pockets. They take his wallet, they take his jewelry. They just basically were like vultures. There lay his dead body, and they're just picking it clean.
Right.
And there's really no better description than the word vultures.
Oh, man. Dare I ask what they do next?
So Kaushal's calling the shots, and they then throw his body in the back of his own Mercedes.
Take note of the make of the car, a Mercedes. It will make another appearance later in the show.
So they hop on the 10 freeway and head back north to the San Francisco area, but along the way, they basically buried the body and took off.
Kaushal, meanwhile, was trying desperately to hop a flight back to the Bay Area, but it was too late in the day. So he called a limo driver he knew from San Francisco and convinced him to drive 7 hours to Palm Springs to pick him up at his hotel.
So where are Danny Garcia and David Replogle while this is happening?
So after Cliff Lambert had been murdered, Kaushal sent a text to Danny that said something to the effect of, "It's done, we own the world." And at this time, Danny and his cousin Dennis are driving, and Danny looked out the window into the darkness and just said, "Poor Cliffy." And David Replogle, at the time of the murder, was in San Francisco.
The limo driver arrived at 6 a.m. to get Kaushal out of Dodge. Once back in the Bay Area, Kaushal was dropped off at David Replogle's office. Over the next few days, Kaushal, Danny, and David were very busy. As planned, David drafted the power of attorney paperwork transferring control of Cliff's entire estate to Russell Manning. Kaushal made arrangements for a mobile notary service to notarize the documents, and it was decided that David would pretend to be Cliff at the appointment. They were about the same age and roughly the same height.
Hello. Hi, Glenn. Who's this?
Hi, Glenn. This is Kim calling from the podcast production company out in Los Angeles that's working on the... Hi.
Hey, I got a few minutes for you.
Bless you.
Glenn and I had texted a handful of times, but it took over a month for us to finally connect.
It's a crazy-ass story.
Crazy.
At the time, Glenn owned a few different businesses in San Francisco. One of them was a mobile notary service that he and his good friend Gary ran together.
So tell me how you came in contact with Kosal Narula.
It was in 2008, and I got a call like really early in the morning. And, we were 24/7 type service. He called, remember, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and he said, I have to sign these documents because I'm going on a trip to South America.
Glenn met up with Kaushal and David Replogle, who was pretending to be Cliff Lambert, in the lobby of a hotel in the Embarcadero.
So when you get to the hotel, there's Kaushal sitting there, and
the attorney, the Replogle?
David Replogle.
He's the one actually signing the documents.
Okay.
In California, you have to have a journal and you have to take a thumbprint. So I executed all the documents. The ID reasonably looked like him. You look at the person's height. Their height doesn't change. That's always the number one thing to look at.
Kaushal sat by watching as power of attorney documents for Cliff's entire estate, as well as documents for his Wells Fargo, Charles Schwab, and Bank of America accounts were being signed over by David Replogle to Russell Manning. Russell, meanwhile, was on ice in a hotel down in Palm Springs, waiting to be told what to do next. Once all the documents were notarized, David Replogle reluctantly gave his thumbprint, and
I completed the notary, and I went home.
Kaushal then flew to Palm Springs to meet with Russell in the parking lot of a bank. Russell countersigned the power of attorney documents. They went inside, met with the bank employee, and had $185,000 wired out of Cliff's account to an account Kaushal had opened in San Francisco. Then, Russell wrote himself a check for $5,000, his fee for helping with the bank transaction. Kaushal then flew back to the Bay Area and was in need of Glenn's notary services yet again.
I met them at the Four Seasons Hotel in San Francisco on Market Street.
Yeah.
So, they seem credible. Oh, Four Seasons. Okay. This guy's got money, so, they kept calling me.
Everyone was happy. Glenn had a well-paying repeat customer, and Kaushal, Danny, David, and their crew had pulled off their biggest score ever. Maybe that's why they thought they'd get away with what was coming next.
They stole the property and said they owned it.
And they give him the $2 million.
And surprisingly, that's not Cliff's house those two guys are talking about. Nope. Instead of laying low, the gay grifters just set their sights higher. Literally. Julie has that part of the story next time on American Hustlers. American Hustlers is a production of Frequency Machine, produced in association with True Crime News. This episode was written and hosted by me, Kim Kantner, and produced by me, Julie Golden, and Avi Glajansky. Editing and sound design by Amy Durant. Mixing and mastering by Julian Kwasniewski. Executive produced by Stacy Book, Dominique Ferrari, and Avi Glajansky. Featuring the voices of Vivek Bola as Kosal Narula, William Updike as Danny Garcia, and David Song as Miguel Bustamante. Music courtesy of Jingle Punks. Archival recordings of Kosal Narula and Danny Garcia provided by Sherry Loiter, Don Martinez, and Kim Hansen. Archival recordings of Craig McCarthy and the Palm Springs Police and Danny Garcia's recordings of Judge Downing and the Court Clerk via DesertSun.com. The book, Until Someone Gets Hurt, by Sherry Loiter and Tyson Wrench, with research assistance by Don Martinez and Kim Hansen, was an invaluable resource for us as we made American Hustlers. You can find a link to it in our show notes. Special thanks to Kathy Lombard, Matt Smith, Andy Wells, Tyson Wrench, Sherry Loiter, Don Martinez, Kim Hansen, Bob Moeller, and Christine Anotu at Warner Brothers. If you like this episode and want to hear more stories like this, please leave us a review and tell everyone. It really helps other people discover the show. For more information on this and all of our series, check out frequencymachine.com.